morning. This is Stan in Gainesville, Florida.
And this is David in beautiful Long Beach, California. And if you don't already know, you are listening to Light Talk, and we are the Lumen Brothers.
It's true.
Hey, welcome to our special URTA episode of Light Talk. And as you can plainly hear, today it's just Stan and me hosting this episode. Steve will be back next week. Well, today we are going to focus on URTA, or the University Resident Theater Association. And Stan is going to tell us what URTA does for the education of future theater artists and introduce our special guest today.
Hey, I will. So here I go, and everybody now pay attention if you don't know. The University Resident Theater Association was founded in 1969 with the mission of supporting excellence in professional training of theater artists, ensuring the continued renewal of the American theater. Since that time, URTA has grown to include many programs and services, all working toward that same goal, whether it's maintaining the highest quality standards for our member universities, helping to match the potential students with the MFA program best suited to their needs, facilitating engagement of professional artists at universities, or expanding our offering of continuing education programming to students, faculty, and professional artists. URTA is setting the stage for emerging theater artists, superior theater training, and professional advancement. And today, our special guest from URTA is Tony Hagopian, who was appointed executive director by the URTA board in April 2018 after the passing of our longtime friend and director, Scott Steele. Hagopian has been with URTA since 2012, most recently as Business and Communications Director, where he led an expansion of the Artist Engagement Service and helped launch a number of new initiatives, including the URTA Candidate Awards and Career Outreach, as well as leading URTA's collective bargaining with the Actors Equity Association. A product of the URTA Auditions himself, Hagopian received his MFA from Temple University. He spent 2 decades performing on and off Broadway at major regional theaters and on film and TV. In 2016, he produced the world premiere of Simon Dawes Becomes the Planet in New York City. He has frequently taught workshops as a guest artist at numerous colleges and universities, and for the last 2 years, he has led URTA's audition outreach to undergraduate theater programs. So, welcome to the show.
Yeah,
Tony,
welcome,
good to have
Tony.
You here.
Good to
Thank
have
you, guys. It's great to be among the Lumen Brothers.
A lot of people don't think that's such a great thing, but we're happy that you are. So
we hope you find it bright.
Very good. Yeah. Very good.
Not very intelligent, but bright.
Well lit.
Well, I've got the first question for Tony. This is really all about what Tony has to say today. So, Tony, tell us exactly what URTA is and why people should really dig in and get to know it better.
Gosh, well, I can give you a really long answer for that, but I'm going to try and compact it down. So URTA, URTA, University Resident Theater Association, is a member association of 43 universities with MFA programs in theater. Our members are all across the nation and abroad. And it was originally established in 1969. We're looking at our 50th anniversary now, and originally the point was to promote excellence in professional theater training, which really was synonymous with the MFA back in those days, and to a certain extent still is. But how we've grown in the decades since is we found many, many ways in which to move forward in that mission in supporting professional theater. We began with what is still our signature program, which is the URTA Auditions and Interviews, which most people just refer to as the URTAs. It's such a common secondhand. And that is where our members get together every year in January, February in New York, Chicago, and California for a combined audition and interview of about 1,200 candidates in all theater disciplines, so acting, every area of design, stage management, arts leadership, directing. But beyond that, now we have our Artist Engagement Service, which is a nonprofit paymaster service that is a huge value to many university theaters, as well as small independent nonprofit theaters, individual artists, and others. We've expanded even the URTAs themselves now, with the satellite auditions, the undergrad preview program, candidate awards. We've expanded our continuing education, which occurs both at the URTAs and throughout the year at different conferences. So, I mean, I could go on and on. We have obviously our collectively bargained equity contract that is used by a few dozen producers across the country, and as well as different universities on a one-off basis. So in every way kind of imaginable, we're supporting that track of professional theater training from the university, the student at the university, the program itself, the faculty, all the way through to the profession. So emerging professionals, early career artists, and students making that transition.
Yeah, speaking of supporting young professionals, you are obviously a result of the URTAs if you go all the way back, right?
Yeah.
It's funny, when I was in grad school, I think this was way before the URTAs. We were still dealing with prehistoric times. I think I used an abacus to figure out all my lighting angles and everything. But seriously, why don't you tell us a little bit about that mission that you have? Because it is such a wonderful support mechanism for young people getting into graduate schools, obviously.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, the premise of our mission is that professional training is a requirement for sustaining a career in the professional theater and the entertainment arts. Now, that training can take any number of forms. Of our 43 members, no two are really the same in terms of their pedagogy and how they approach the work. We obviously have a lot of criteria, baseline criteria that we hold them to in terms of quality and outcomes and things like that. But how they go about it is very different. But the thing, like I say, the premise that holds there is that professional training is really a necessity. So what the URTAs does, the Auditions and Interviews program, is really make that training accessible to candidates that are looking for grad school. If you're someone who's saying, I'm at a point where I'd like really, intense conservatory-based training in lighting design or set design or directing. The number of programs that you could be researching and applying to, the number of trips you could be making, campus visits, it's mind-boggling. So you can come to the URTAs, and you've got our 43 members plus however many guest and non-member institutions are there. You could be meeting and interviewing with many schools all in one site. You can see very quickly which programs are more of a match for you, which are not. There really is no more efficient, cost-effective, more productive way to take that first step into pursuing MFA training than the URTAs. It's obviously great for our schools too, because they get to come to one place and see all these candidates.
Speaking of that, maybe you could give us a little play-by-play about how these interviews go and what a potential student and/or recruiter can expect. Like, how does it happen? Or how does it unfold?
Sure. So it's we contain it to a single day. Although we're in each city for a number of days, and we have other programming, continuing ed, and things that are available, the URTA's process itself, we keep it to one day so that a candidate can travel to Chicago and do the entire process, and maybe spend one night and then leave the next day. So we like that to keep the barriers of entry accessible. So that being said, it is a long day. The candidates will check in the morning around 7:30. They'll get an orientation from URTA staff about how the event works and what the expectations are, what they need to be doing. They'll get an hour to set up their station. Each one gets a table which is about 3 by 2 by 3 or so, that they can set up their portfolio and their materials, their models or what have you, and then they get a little bit of a break while the recruiters come in and do a walkthrough of the hall and they get to make notes. And I should mention that when candidates are registering online, which registration is open currently, they are able to upload materials. We use an application platform called Accepted, which allows for candidates to upload things like their headshots or resumes or portfolios or website links. So a lot of the recruiters have seen some of this material ahead of time. So they've already got notes about candidates they're looking for or, to keep an eye on. And we strongly suggest that candidates really take advantage of that because it's all to their advantage to have that stuff available online. But that said, after the candidates have set up their materials in the morning, the recruiters do a walkthrough, and the recruiters will have an orientation as well, and then they'll have morning interviews, which usually go for about 2.5 hours. This is a slightly new creation in terms of the schedule, where based on those online materials that recruiters have already seen, they contact the URTA office and they say, well, I know so far I want to interview these 8 candidates. And so we're able to schedule those interviews ahead of time. So those happen in the morning around 10:30. They go a couple of hours. And then there's a lunch break. And meanwhile, the recruiters have, after they do their walkthrough in the morning, they say, okay, here's some more candidates that I want to see, based on, the students that may not have had materials online or just, seeing more material in person in the design hall. They say, here's people I'd like to see in the afternoon. So we go, everyone takes a lunch break. URTA staff goes and use a computer program to generate these schedules. And then everyone comes back to the design hall about 2:30. And those additional afternoon interviews take place. The interviews themselves, like I said, they happen in the design hall where there may be, 40 or 50 portfolios set up, and each portfolio, each candidate's station has a few chairs there, and the interviews happen right there at their station. So the faculty sit down with them. They have 15 minutes to, discuss their portfolio, give them some feedback. Candidates can ask questions about their program. They, can make sure that they're giving whatever information they feel is important, to the candidate. And, all those interviews are a little bit different, from school to school. Everyone approaches it differently, but, they have their 15 minutes. And those generally go into the late afternoon, depending. Some candidates may have interviews all the way into the evening, 7 or 8 o'clock. And then that's it.
No, wow. That's not it. Wait a minute. That was really blow by blow, but there's more to the story, isn't there, Tony?
Yeah, there really is. There's a lot more to the story. One of the values of the URTA's process, and again, this really is valuable for both the candidates and the schools, is what we like to call the serendipity factor. So if we may have on a given day, we may have 20 schools that are recruiting, and like I said, there may be 40 or 50 candidates. Candidates should do their best to research these programs and find out as much as they can about them and be as well versed. But with that many programs, there's only so much, right, you can do, and they're getting a chorus of voices from their undergrad professors and their peers and general rumor and innuendo about different programs, and you should look at this program, or this program has this and so they've inevitably they've got a lot of notions about schools that they're most interested in, ones that they know less about. But the great thing about the URTAs is when you get in that room, all those schools are on a level playing field. If a candidate came there with the intention, mainly of wanting to meet School A, School B can get an interview with that candidate and say, look, you may not be as familiar with our program, but this, and this. And very often that candidate's mind is blown. They say, oh my gosh, I had no idea. And I mean, this isn't just, anecdotal. This is like, this happens all the time in acting and design, directing, where a candidate says, I ended up going to such and such university. Before the URTAs, they weren't on my radar, but when I met with the recruiters at the URTAs, it was everything I wanted. Or I didn't even realize what I wanted was blank, but when I met with so that's really, the kind of hard to measure, but I think most important, valuable thing about the URTAs.
That's a really good point. I know that, from a recruiter's point of view, and I've been doing URTAs, oh God, this is frightening. 28 years I've been doing URTAs. And that's really frightening. But and it's developed quite a bit. But also, from a recruiter's point of view, this does happen all the time. I work now with California State University Long Beach, and a lot of students never even heard of our program. And I'll sit down with them, and they'll say, I didn't even do any research about your program because I didn't even know it was there. It was just listed. And then all of a sudden they say, wow, that's really interesting. You're absolutely right. So I was going to ask you, what advice would you have for students who are preparing for the URTAs, as far as doing the research about the schools, as far as, asking questions, when they finally do meet the recruiter?
Yeah, that's great. One thing when we do our career outreach where we'll go out to undergraduate classes or interns and apprentice groups at different theaters, and we talk about grad school and the bridge to the profession. And one thing that they always ask is, well, should I go to grad school? How do I know if I'm ready? How do I know if it's time? And I think the answer to that is the same answer to your question. The first thing that you have to answer is why. Why do you want to go to grad school? Why do you think you need to go to grad school? What is it you want from grad school? You need to answer that, and that can change. It's not like you answer it and then you're locked into something. But you need to start with an answer to that, because that's going to inform all of your research from that point forward. If you want to be a costume designer, you're thinking, I want to go to grad school for costume design. What is it? What skill set? What do you need to learn? What skill set do you need to develop? Is it, I'm very creative, but my technical skills, my drafting, I need to learn more. Then you need to look at a program that has, drafting and drawing and that kind of stuff as part of the curriculum. If maybe your drafting and stuff is excellent, but your technical skills, you figure, well, I want to be a designer, and I know in my early career I'm going to have to probably be hands-on building some of this stuff, but I don't know my way around a sewing machine, whatever it is, I'm pulling stuff out of the air. But you need to know what it is you're looking for. So then when you launch into research, it means something, and it's not just a wave of faculty bios and financial aid numbers and stuff, but you're looking at it in some kind of context. And then that said, you need to do as much research as you can. We have on URTA.com, we have a list of all our member schools that hyperlinks to their department's webpage, and that's a great place to start. Certainly with our programs. I would definitely look at, the things like faculty bios. Who are you going to be learning from? Especially in an MFA program, you're going to spend 3 years, probably all day, every day, with some of these faculty who are going to be your mentors. They may be the people that bridge you into the profession. So try to learn as much about them as you can. What kind of work will you be doing? Does the program lean more towards just classwork? Do you get a chance to work in production, or vice versa? Is everything seem to be production focused with not very much, studio time? Do you need a balance of that? There's not necessarily a right or wrong there. Again, it goes back to that. What are you looking for? Why are you going? But that's all stuff to research.
As you were talking about the why question, I was thinking, tried to put myself in the shoes of a potential student. There's sort of like the difficulty, I think, is knowing what you don't know.
Yeah.
Right. And I think for young people, it's hard to know what they don't know. So, it's sort of like exposure to theater, reading the trade magazines, scratching your head. I do a thing now. I think I got this from Steve, or I don't know who we stole this from. But when my students come on the first year, we do a list and say, let's make a list of the things that you don't think you understand well now. And then we're going to revisit that list in your final semester and see if we got it.
Oh, that's great.
So in a way, I wish we would do that at URTA. It's like, I would like students to come with a list. These are the things I don't know. And these are the things I want to learn. And then I can judge whether my program is the best one for them because of the kinds of things that we do or any program does.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And that's really interesting what Stan just said, in the sense that when I go to URTA, my primary goal is not to recruit for my school. I think my primary goal is to find the right school for every single candidate that I meet. And I would say, yeah, exactly. And, because we know all these schools, they're colleagues, they're friends of ours. And, if a student, says, I really want to do musicals, I just want to, just focus on that. I know immediately that my school is not the best school for that particular student. So what I would do, and I'm sure Stan and Steve do the same, is say, we don't do that, but who does that well? You should check into, check into Austin.
I do that all the time.
Because it is a service. I never think it's, if I don't get, let's say my quota, I want to get 3 lighting designers. If I get one, and I've advised 10 others to go to schools I feel that would serve them, I feel that that's a success. I don't, just say 3, because those other 2 may not have, my school may not be the right school for them. So I think that most people at URTA, most of the recruiters feel that way. And so we see it as a service. And I think, URTA has, education is a big part of URTA. And I was going to ask you, throw you another question we didn't send you.
Sure.
But, one year, I think this is where I met Stan. We were on a panel, and I forgot what it was about.
I do. I remember it precisely.
And what was it about, Stan?
It was about, and I forget who set it up, but we got recruits. We're trying to do a thing for students to to think more broadly about their career than just stage work, and which designers do we have who do things outside of the traditional applications of lighting design. And I was one. David was another, and there was a third gentleman from, I think, the university in Illinois, and we were put on this panel, and students came, and we talked about our careers and our philosophy of lighting design, and it was great. And that's how David and I did meet the first time.
Yeah, I would love to see URTA do more of that. I mean, because I think that's an educational opportunity for these students. A lot of them come from very small towns. They may never have met a lighting designer other than their lighting teacher and their, their undergraduate school. It's a great opportunity. And I know, speaking from my colleagues who go to URTA, that we just love doing it. And it'd be great if there was time in the schedule to do more of that. What do you think, Tony?
Absolutely. I mean, we have, over the last 3 years, we've really kind of expanded the continuing ed side of the URTAs to about as much as the schedule can currently contain, and then now we're looking at how can we expand the schedule. But there's at least something every single day, and it, especially in Chicago where all of the design technology recruiting happens, we try to program it focused on who's there that day. So if it's primarily a costume day for candidates and recruiters, then the continuing ed will be focused on costume issues or costume professionals, something like that. But yeah, we certainly are trying to do as much and more of that as we can, and we're also our continuing ed program I mentioned earlier, it spans beyond the URTAs. We're doing a lot more events at conferences like American College Theater Festival and USITT and SETC, with similar programs like the panel that you guys were on, or other things that about graduate school or the path to the profession or the different areas of work, all that kind of stuff that's valuable to those students. We're really trying to push the bar on that.
So maybe with all that behind us, and that's some really good information there, can you give us a peek at what the organization will be doing in the future, and where is URTA going, and how are you handling changing times? Because boy, they are a-changing.
They really are. Certainly, you touched on it a little bit, Stan. On the design side, the world of work that is entertainment design, beyond the narrowly focused theater work, which a lot of programs have traditionally focused on. Now there really is an expansion in that, in terms of both obviously the avenues in the profession, but then naturally the training that leads to it. That was one session that we had, I think last year or the year before, that was really a session aimed at faculty. We had a fellow, Bill Dignight from Marquette, Michigan, came and spoke on this subject, and to faculty who were interested in how do we capture some of these students that an MFA in design could be valuable for, who want to work in these areas, and also how do they expand their programs to make their programs both appealing and useful for that type of candidate. But so that's something that, as an organization, we're always trying to do what we can to enable programs to make those evolutionary leaps, and put faculty together, and discuss pedagogy and trade best practices and things like that. But in the sense of our programs, and our services, I think what we're really focused on right now is looking at what we already do and trying to find ways that we can expand the mission in each program. So I mentioned with the URTAs, we've added the satellite auditions, which is non-member acting programs that the candidates can audition for. We've got our undergrad preview program, which allows undergraduates in theater to either sit in on the acting auditions or take a chaperoned tour through the design hall led by one of our URTA design faculty, that kind of sort of narrates for them the graduate process and expectations and how to do a portfolio. So it's really sort of prepping undergrads for that transition to grad school. We've added a job fair, which started last year digitally. Like I said, all the candidates are able to upload all this material now ahead of time, and they can, on their registration, they can opt in to making those materials available to producing companies that may be looking for summer hires. So all that material is available to those companies, and then this year we have a couple that are coming on site to either attend the auditions or have a table in the design hall. So that's another aspect of another way we're expanding an existing program to further the mission. Our artist engagement services, which has been around for a long time and was originally created for university theaters that didn't have a way of contracting professional artists, or needed to have a payroll service that took them on, because they couldn't be employed directly through the university, those sort of bureaucratic issues. We've really taken that and expanded it hugely in terms of the types of clients now that we're servicing. We even have a lot of individual artists now who are using it either for acting work or for designers on a project basis. I think that is, I would say that's the model right now, is we're saying, what do we already do and how can we do more of it?
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, very cool.
Now look into your crystal ball and let's look at the future. What challenges do you see URTA facing in the future, like 5-10 years down the road?
That's a real good question. I think, the nature of professional training and how that's defined is undergoing a little bit of a transformation. In 1969, professional theater training meant an MFA, basically. There wasn't really BFAs to speak of. I mean, there was maybe Juilliard and a couple of other places, but you had sort of a liberal arts BA, theater degree, sort of a generalist, and then if you wanted real professional training, then you went to graduate school for an MFA. That's what there was. That isn't necessarily the case now. There's probably fewer MFA programs than there was just a few years ago. There's a proliferation of BFA programs, some of which are truly professional programs, that are feeding right into the profession and could go toe-to-toe with MFA programs, but, some that are not. And this definition of what is professional training, I think, is a question for URTA, since our mission is supporting that kind of training, is something we'll have to continue to look at and answer, because I think that's a real change in the landscape right now.
So, since we're in crystal ball world, and maybe not specific to URTA, but and this is maybe a good question to wrap on, is in a macro sense, I get the feeling that entertainment in general is really going through an upheaval, and I think academia is going through an upheaval. From where you sit, what do you see in terms of the maybe URTA's mission, and just from your vantage point, in terms of the tremendous change that's happening in so many different ways? What things stand out to you?
Well, it's interesting because I agree with you. All this change is plain to see. You can't argue with it. But at the same time, I think in a lot of ways it's that case of the more things change, the more they stay the same. So, there may be all kinds of new avenues of work for designers, doing, international concerts and worship design and things like that. Actors may be creating their own, devised work and working on streaming platforms and things like that. So, the outlets are changing and maybe the skill sets are evolving. But the bottom line is, as a whether you want to call it a theater artist or an entertainment artist, that professional training component really is still a necessity. You even see some of the most successful sort of like YouTube personalities or online personalities are actually graduates of quality theater programs.
Absolutely.
People don't necessarily know that. It's not a question.
Right.
There is a sort of a notion that a lot of people have, even within the theater industry, of nowadays any no talent jerk just gets a cell phone and blah blah blah. But I don't think that's really the case. And the medium changes and the outlets are evolving, but that training is still a necessity, and that's URTA's mission. So in that sense, I don't think we're going anywhere. I think what we really need to do is keep our eye on the ball with what our members are training students to do and how they're doing it, and are they up on best practices and current technologies and things like that. But the basis of what we do, I don't think is really going to change that much.
Okay. Well, I wasn't necessarily just speaking about URTA, but the profession at large.
Yeah. Well, I mean, certainly. I mean, it cuts both ways. I mean, there's so many changes, but the main thing I think you see is the loss of the gatekeeper. So certainly from an actor's point of view, the idea that you have to wait around to get cast in something is not necessarily the case any longer, and I think that's the case for people in other entertainment disciplines too, whether it's design or directing. Well, certainly like film directors. It used to be so prohibitive, access to film and a steam back and all that kind of stuff. Now, with digital shooting, it's really it opens it up to so many more people. So you've got that, but then the flip side of that is it creates a torrent of content from which you have to somehow rise above to be seen.
I think you said a very interesting thing there. Maybe that's the title of the episode: is the loss of the gatekeeper. That things were sort of cracked open in a way from a recruitment standpoint in ways they were not. As the world is flatter, to quote Tom Friedman in that wonderful book. So that gatekeeper loss that's a paradigm shift right there.
Yeah, and It's interesting you mentioned that how that plays into recruitment, because I think that is, URTA's been around for 50 years, and I think, over that time there's, there's been an ebb and flow over the value of combined recruitment. I think obviously it's always leaned toward, that's a positive thing. But there have been moments, I think, where people say, well, maybe if we go off on our own, we'll have some kind of value of being, independent or something like that. But, with, like you say, with the loss of the gatekeepers, I think the trend right now is for everyone wants to get in that room, that level playing field to say, like, look, you can, there's so many, with the internet, you can do a lot of research, you can learn about a lot of programs, and so it's really necessary for a program to be in that URTA room or what have you, as this sort of critical mass of programs.
So, Tony, do you have any final words for our listeners?
I would say just a couple of things that I would love to make sure get out there. We offer a candidate award, which is basically free registration for the URTAs, as well as free attendance to all continuing ed at the URTAs. And currently, that is offered to all candidates in sound design, as well as arts leadership. So if you're thinking about attending the URTAs as a sound designer, there's really no reason not to do it, because it's free, essentially. You just have to get yourself there. And I would also point out for students registering right now, there is a checkoff on the registration where they can pay it forward. They can make a small donation to the Candidate Award Fund, which is matched dollar for dollar by Vertigo, one of our sponsors, and that will go towards funding future candidate awards. And I just want to make sure that everyone's aware of that.
Well, Tony, thank you so much for being on Light Talk today.
Yeah.
And before we end, I want to give you a personal thank you and everyone at URTA for changing that insane early morning bums
jump
rush.
starts. Hated those.
We called it the bums rush.
I hated it. I wouldn't
Well,
do
personally, I saw 3 people killed during that because, all the young people can do it. But now being an older person, I cannot compete and I get run over. But thank you so
Well,
much.
just because you were in that walker, David. But I wanted to say with jump starts, what I did? I stayed late. I never did a jump start, and I figured if I am the last person the guy sees,
Yeah.
and
They're
they
delirious.
remember me, and they remember me when they're bleary-eyed, so I had to work harder. So I don't appreciate the fact that you made me work harder, but I turned it to my advantage. But I'm glad they're gone.
So thank you so much. And
You're welcome.
thanks for making your way down to Light Talk Central in the swamps of Gainesville
Yeah,
to
electronically.
talk to us today. Hey guys, that Hammond organ solo in the background tells us that once again you've spent another morning listening to Light Talk. You can hear us on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play Music, iHeartRadio, SoundCloud, Libsyn. Oh my God, tune in just about any other podcast distributor out there. And be sure to follow us on our website, lighttalk.org, and Light Talk Facebook group page. And subscribe to our podcast. That way you will not miss a second of Lumen Insanity.
And speaking of insanity, no guarantees are offered regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions on this podcast. And remember, we brought the lawyers back. So if you do take us seriously and you decide to litigate, the law firm of Tungsten, Phosphor, and Filament will defend us until our retirement funds are completely depleted.
Light Talk is written and produced by the Lumen Brothers, coming to you from Long Beach and the swamps of Gainesville.
Swampy Land. Light Talk, broadcasting questionable lumen and recruitment knowledge around the world.
So we'll see you all next Saturday morning. Bye-bye from Light Talk, and thanks,
Bye-bye.
Tony.
Wait, thank you, Tony.
Thank you.
See you in January.
Yep.
In the cold.
Chicago.